we are off to the 5th chapter of Flamingo Indigo by Louis Fisher. Now, do you remember, what do you understand with indigo? If I talk of a rainbow, if I give you a clue, rainbow, still do you recollect what can indigo be? Vibgyor are the colors of your rainbow. So, violet, indigo, green, yellow, orange, yeah, blue, green, yellow, orange, vibgyor, yeah, yellow, orange, red. So, if I talk of indigo in that, there is vibgyor, like we said. Now, indigo is this blue, basically it's the name of this plant from which we get a deep blue color. From this plant, they make a deep blue color. So that is why the name is indigo. Before you get confused that this is the title and what does this have to indicate. So that is it. That's the name of the flower. And from this flower, you get the indigo color. Hence, that's indigo. Yeah. So let's see further about the author as always. So Louis Fisher was born in Philadelphia. We know Philadelphia is Pennsylvania's largest city. Yeah. So he was born there. He served as a volunteer in the British Army between 1918 and 1920. Fisher made a career as a journalist and wrote for the New York Times, the Saturday Review, and for European and Asian publications. He was also a member of the faculty at Princeton University. The following is an excerpt from his book. An excerpt is in one small section of that book. This chapter that we are going to read just now, it is a part of his book. Which book? The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. Yes. The book has been reviewed as one of the best books ever written on Gandhi by Times Educational Supplement. That's one of the best books. So what we are going to read is a part of one of the best books. Yeah, this is an excerpt from it, a part of it. So what is it all about? In Indigo, Louis describes Gandhi's struggle for the poor peasants of Champaran who were the sharecroppers with the British planters. Now we will get into detail, just get the gist first. They led a miserable life and were forced to grow indigo according to an agreement. They suffered a great injustice due to the landlord system in Bihar. Gandhi waged a war for about a year against their atrocities and brought justice to the poor peasants. So he was successful in, taking care of the peasants, the poor peasants who were suffering so many atrocities. But then, yes, he was successful. It took him a year, right, to fight, for them. But then, yeah, eventually he won it. Let's know in detail and you shall understand the entire story. We need to understand our characters who are involved in the story. So we have Mahatma Gandhi. We know he's the Indian national leader. Rajendra Prasad, a lawyer, and later, so then he was a lawyer. And later he became the President of India. J.B. Kriplani, a professor in Art College, Muzaffarpur, Bihar. Professor Malkani, a teacher in a government school. Sir Edward Gate, Lieutenant Governor. Rajkumar Shukla, a sharecropper from Champaran, Bihar. Champaran was in Bihar. Charles Freer Andrews, a follower of Gandhi. Kasturba, wife of Mahatma Gandhi. And Devdas, youngest son of Gandhi. So now let's see how these characters have played their role. When I first visited Gandhi in 1942 at his ashram in Sevagram in central India, he said, I will tell you how it happened that I decided to urge the departure of the British. It was in 1917. Now here Gandhiji is narrating how the whole episode actually happened, how he actually asked or insisted the British to leave. This urge, that was the, the desire, that actual determination, insist rather. This began in the year 1917. Yeah. So let's see what all had happened and how Gandhiji tells it all. So he had gone to the December 1916 annual convention of the Indian National Congress Party in Lucknow. There were 2,301 delegates and many visitors. Delegates as in many representatives. And there were many visitors too. So he had gone for the Indian National Congress Party. Now, during the proceedings, while this thing was happening, Gandhi recounted a peasant came up to me. He tried to remember again that a peasant we know is a farmer, right? He came up to me looking like any other peasant in India, poor and emaciated. Emaciated as in weak, thin, typically due to starvation. See, it's a very unfortunate thing that it is the farmers who grow the crops. Those are the crops we eat. We become nice and healthy. We get all the nutritions. And the people who actually grow the crops, they themselves are weak and thin. Now, isn't that a very unfortunate thing? Yeah, but then that's how the plight of the farmers was then. So, he says he was, poor and emaciated. He was very, very weak and thin. And he said, I am Rajkumar Shukla. That was the peasant's name, the farmer's name. I am from Champaran and I want you to come to my district. He says, look, this is my name and I am from Champaran and I want you to come with me there. Why so? Gandhi had never heard of the place. He had never heard of Champaran existing. It was in the foothills of the towering Himalayas near the kingdom of Nepal. Where was it exactly? The foothills as in a low hill at the base of a mountain or a mountain range. It was just there, and it was where of the foothills of the Himalayas, which were very tall, very high. We all know that, right? That's near the kingdom of Nepal. Under an ancient arrangement, the Champaran peasants were sharecroppers. Now let's understand what is a sharecropper. Tenant farmer who gives a part of each crop as rent. Now, the land belonged to the British, okay, because they were ruling then, right? So the Indians had no right to own the land. So those British people owned the land. Now, obviously, they were not definitely going to do any farming. So it was these poor peasants who actually took up a part of the land for farming. Now, obviously, if you are using someone else's land, you have to pay the rent, correct? Now, what these smart British people did was, they asked the farmers to pay them rent, in the sense now they had no money. So he said, you grow some crops and those crops you give us as rent. And here, which is the crop we know as indigo. So they asked those farmers, you grow that much crop, right? And you pay us that. That was the agreement they had, between the tenant. So this is how it was. These were the sharecroppers. Tenant farmer, right, who gives a part of each crop as rent. He wouldn't pay money, but whatever he grew on that land to the particular owner, he would go and give that crop. Rajkumar Shukla was one of them. He too did the same. He was illiterate but resolute. He was determined. He was illiterate. He was not even educated enough. But yes, he had the determination that this should not happen to us. This is injustice. This is totally unfair. He had come to the Congress session to complain about the injustice of the landlord system in Bihar, and somebody had probably said, speak to Gandhi. Now, he had come to the Congress party there. He had come to that session over there where these all people had met, and he wanted to complain that, look, do something about this landlord system in Bihar. It is totally unfair. It's not right. It's total injustice. So someone suggested to him, okay, if this is the thing, in this case, you should go and speak to Gandhiji. Gandhi told Shukla he had an appointment in Kanpur and was also committed to go to other parts of India. Now, Kanpur is basically Kanpur, what we say, yeah? Those days, now it was the British accent and, so it was different. So he had an appointment there and he was also committed to go to other parts of India. Shukla accompanied him everywhere. He says, whatever, no problem, I'll wait for you. You finish all your commitments, but you are coming with me to Champaran. Then Gandhi returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad. Shukla followed him to the ashram. Shukla went with him even there to ashram near Ahmedabad. For weeks, he never left Gandhi's side. Fix a date, he begged. He knew that Gandhiji was the only person who could help them out of this trouble. And so he kept begging him to please fix a date. When can you come to Champaran? Impressed by the sharecropper's tenacity and story, Gandhi said, I have to be in Calcutta on such and such a date. Come and meet me and take me from there. Now, he was so impressed by the sharecropper's tenacity as in determination. He saw he's not giving up. Wherever Gandhiji went, he was with him, begging him for a date. He says, okay, now this is something I need to look into because this man seems to be in trouble. Right? So I better do something. So Gandhiji made up his mind and he told him, okay, fine. I have to be in Calcutta on such and such a date. You come there, meet me, and then you take me from there because I don't know anything about Champaran. Months passed, many months passed. Shukla was sitting on his haunches at the appointed spot in Calcutta when Gandhi arrived. Now, do you see this man? He is sitting on his haunches. Buttocks and thighs considered together, right? So this is when you sit on your haunches. So the next time you come across someone sitting like that or anything, you should know that they are sitting on their haunches. Yeah. See, this vocabulary is basically there to help you out, to help you add to your vocabulary. So you have the, the picture, you have the meaning. So please start using them. It's really, going to benefit you. It's going to raise your level of English. So let's move on. After many months, Shukla was sitting on his haunches, it's just specified, at the appointed place where in Calcutta where Gandhiji was supposed to meet, where he was supposed to come. He waited till Gandhi was free. He waited there. There was some meeting or something. He waited over there till Gandhiji got free. Then the two of them boarded a train for the city of Patna in Bihar. Then finally, both of them boarded a train for the city of Patna in Bihar. There, Shukla led him to the house of a lawyer named Rajendra Prasad. Now, Rajendra Prasad, we are all aware, right? But he became a president later. Then he was a lawyer, who later became the president of the Congress Party and of India. Rajendra Prasad was out of town. Now, he took him there to his place. But at that point of time when Gandhiji went, Rajendra Prasad was out of town. But the servants knew Shukla as a poor yeoman who pestered their master to help the indigo sharecroppers. Now the servants over there, they knew him as a man holding and cultivating a small landed estate. The servants knew that he is a poor peasant and he grows, he has a small landed estate and he cultivates indigo over there. So he knew because he had pestered their master, as in he had approached whom? Rajendra Prasad, right? Rajkumar Shukla had approached Rajendra Prasad, to help the indigo sharecroppers so that they could help him. Rajendra Prasad could help them with their problem. So they let him stay on the grounds with his companion Gandhi, whom they took to be another peasant. Now, those servants were not aware who is Gandhiji, right? They were not, then you didn't have social media, so you were not really aware of everything. So these guys had not known. So they also thought, okay, he's a friend of his, he also must be another poor peasant. So fine, they let them stay there. But Gandhi was not permitted to draw water from the well, lest some drops from his bucket pollute the entire source. How did they know that he was not an untouchable? Now, if you remember, if you recall history, they were considered as untouchables. That time, this was the biggest problem. Yeah. So, Gandhiji was not allowed because they were not aware that he's not an untouchable. Right. How were they to know? Right. So, he was not allowed to draw water from the well just in case some drops from his bucket. So, when he fills the bucket, some drops of water, they might fall from there and they might pollute the whole source from where he took the water. How did they know that he was not an untouchable? How were they to know? They were not aware. Gandhi decided to go first to Muzaffarpur, which was en route to Champaran. He says, now before going to Champaran, on the way they had to come across Muzaffarpur. So first he wanted to go there to obtain more complete information about conditions than Shukla was capable of imparting. Now he wanted some more information on this indigo sharecroppers. Rajkumar Shukla was not that aware. How much information he gave was not enough to Gandhiji. So he said, let me find out. Let me find out from Muzaffarpur what exactly is the scenario. Only then can I do something about it. He accordingly sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kripalani of the Arts College in Muzaffarpur, whom he had seen at Tagore's Shanti Niketan school. Now what he did was he sent a telegram. Those days you would send a telegram. Yeah. Then you did not have WhatsApp, right? So you could not message. Neither could you send a mail. So he sent a telegram, which was the fastest then. So he sent it to whom? To the Arts College in Muzaffarpur, to the professor over there, J.B. Kripalani. And he had seen this person, this professor, where? At Tagore's Shanti Niketan school. So he was aware of him. The train arrived at midnight on 15th April 1917. Okay, they arrived at midnight. Kripalani was waiting at the station with a large body of students. Now just imagine, though it was midnight, just look at the respect. Just look at the respect for Gandhiji. All of them, Kripalani along with a large body of students, was waiting at the station. Gandhi stayed there for 2 days in the home of Professor Malkani, a teacher in a government school. Now, Kripalani went to receive him, but where did Gandhiji stay? He stayed with Professor Malkani, who was a teacher in a government school. Now just imagine, he was in a government school. He used to work there. He was a professor there. It was an extraordinary thing in those days. Gandhiji says, for a government professor to harbor a man like me. He says in those days it was very different. It was totally different, and imagine a government professor to actually give shelter to a person like me, to Gandhi. He gave Gandhiji shelter, right? In smaller localities, the Indians were afraid to show sympathy for the advocates of home rule. Now this was a small place. They were very scared. Why they were scared to give shelter to such people? Who were they? Sympathy for advocates of home rule. What do you mean by home rule? A colony or dependent country governed by its own citizens. You know, Swaraj. Yes. So these were those people, right? They wanted self-government. They were fighting for it. So people were very afraid to support such people. They were very afraid because again the British might, just punish them or do things like that. So these people used to be very scared. So not everybody. Now imagine this Professor Malkani had so much courage, and he even had the respect for Gandhi that he let him stay in his house, knowing the fact that the British would not like it. But still he went on for it. So it was very difficult those days, but then yes. The news of Gandhi's advent and of the nature of his mission spread quickly through Muzaffarpur and to Champaran. Now the news that Gandhi's arrival, that Gandhiji has arrived and why he has arrived, what was the mission, why was he there, what was the reason of his coming, that also news spread quickly through Muzaffarpur and Champaran. Sharecroppers from Champaran began arriving on foot and by conveyance to see their champion. Now the sharecroppers who were there at Champaran, now he was at Muzaffarpur, they literally walked from there. They began arriving on foot, as in they walked right from Champaran to Muzaffarpur, and of course some of them had some kind of vehicles for transportation. They used that. But they came to see their champion, that person who is going to free them. So obviously he was a champ. Muzaffarpur lawyers called on Gandhi to brief him. They called on him as in they went to meet him. That's called on. That's what it means, the phrasal verb. So they called on Gandhi to brief him. They frequently represented peasant groups in court. It says quite often, we are the ones who represent these sharecroppers in the court. They told him about their cases, all the cases that, they had experienced, they had so far put up in the court. And they reported the size of their fee. They even informed him that, look, this is the fee we charge them. Gandhi chided the lawyers for collecting big fee from the sharecroppers. He scolded them mildly. He says, how can you be so heartless? These people are already poor and you are charging them such a big sum to pay for your fees. How will they feed themselves and their families? So it's so unfair of you to have done that, right? Big fee from the sharecroppers. He said, Finally, Gandhi said, I have come to the conclusion that we should stop going to law courts. He says, I think this is pointless. We should not approach the law courts any longer. Taking such cases to the courts does little good. It's not going to work out. It's not going to benefit. Nothing is going to happen. It's such a waste of time. It is such a big waste of money. Where the peasants are so crushed and fear-stricken, law courts are useless. In places where the poor peasants are literally crushed and fear-stricken, they are so scared. They are totally, dominated upon. So in that case, such places are useless to visit. The real relief for them is to free them from fear. He says the biggest relief for such peasants is, first and foremost, they should stop getting afraid. They should stop getting scared. Why should they get so scared? So first thing is, eradicate their fear. Just drive away their fear, make them strong and bold. Most of the arable land in the Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by Englishmen and worked by Indian tenants. Like I told you right at the beginning. So this land, the whole land, it was divided into small estates, right? And these estates were owned by Englishmen, and of course, they were the Indian tenants. Tenants as in people who pay rent for using a property. Now, these people used to, cultivate crops there. So like mentioned before, they used to give those Englishmen, the owners, the landowners, the part of the crop as rent. Arable land as in cultivable or suitable for farming. That land was suitable for farming. That is the reason, these people would own it, and they used to have Indian tenants. Now, the chief commercial crop was indigo. Already mentioned, it was this deep blue color flowers they were supposed to grow. The landlords compelled all the tenants, compelled as in they forced all the tenants to plant 3/20ths or 15% of their holdings with indigo and surrender the entire indigo harvest as rent. This was done by long-term contract. Now, these poor tenants, the people, the Indian farmers, who actually grew crops on the land of the Englishmen. Now, what they were forced? They were forced by the Englishmen that you have to 15% of your land, you should cultivate, you should grow indigo plant, and that entire 15% has to come to us. Yeah, you have to give it to us in the form of rent, and this was done by long-term contract. It was an entire contract. This was a very long-term contract which these poor tenants had to follow, and they were tired of it. That is why Rajkumar Shukla actually started this whole thing, that we want to get free from this. We don't want to give these people this crop. Presently, the landlords learned that Germany had developed synthetic indigo. Now, the landlords means who? The Englishmen. Now, they got to know that Germany had started making this deep blue color through synthetic indigo. They were making it themselves. Now, they no longer needed these flowers, right, to make the deep blue color. It was an artificial indigo color they were making over there. They thereupon obtained agreements from the sharecroppers to pay them compensation for being released from the 15% arrangement. Now see how ruthless, how cruel these people were. Now these Englishmen, they got to know that Germany does not need these flowers any longer. So basically they were exporting it there. Now they got to know that they don't need it any longer. So what they did was, they called all the sharecroppers, all the people who were using their land. They told them, get your agreements. Okay, get your agreements. He called upon their agreements, and he told them that you have to pay us some compensation. Why? So that we can release you from the 15% which you all are doing, you all are paying us that rent. If you want to get free from it, for that also you have to pay us something. You have to compensate. If you do it, you are free from that, right? If not, then obviously they wouldn't like it. They would do something against him. So this is what they did. Now, the poor peasants were not aware of anything. They were not aware of Germany. They were not aware that they've got synthetic indigo. They knew nothing. But they were happy for the fact that, oh wow, they're releasing us from the 15% holding rent. So great. In that case, let's give the compensation and become free. Then the entire land is ours. The sharecropping arrangement was irksome to the peasants. It was troublesome. It was irritating. Every time they had to give it to the Englishmen. And many signed willingly. Many were so happy that, oh please, we are ready to sign, take the compensation, take the money, but free us from it. They were not aware of more than that. Those who resisted, those who did not sign, those who did not pay the compensation, engaged lawyers. They actually involved lawyers. They brought the lawyers that to tell them that this is not done. We are not paying any compensation. The landlords hired thugs. Thugs as in goons. Now, because these people hired lawyers, those people hired thugs. Meanwhile, the information about synthetic indigo reached the illiterate peasants who had signed and they wanted their money back. Now, gradually, this information about synthetic indigo being produced in Germany, it reached the news. This news reached to the illiterate peasants and those who had given the money, those who had signed, very willingly. Now they said, we want the money back because you have cheated us. You have taken the money for no rhyme or reason. You have cheated. We want that money back. At this point, Gandhi arrived in Champaran. Now, while this was happening, Gandhiji arrived in Champaran. He began by trying to get the facts. First and foremost, he tried to collect all the facts. First, he visited the secretary of the British Landlords Association. He went to the secretary of the British Landlords Association. The secretary told him that they could give no information to an outsider. They said, look, you are an outsider. You don't even stay here. I'm sorry, we can give you no information. Why? Because remember, Gandhiji was actually trying to collect some facts. Gandhi answered that he was no outsider. He says, I am not an outsider. I am an Indian and I want to know the information. Next, that was one thing he did to collect the fact. What was the next he did? He called on the British official commissioner of the Tirhut division in which the Champaran district lay. Now, the next he approached was the British official commissioner of the Tirhut division. Now, that is where actually Champaran district lay. The commissioner, Gandhi reports, proceeded to bully me and advised me forthwith to leave Tirhut. He says now that commissioner actually proceeded to bully me as in harming someone who is considered weaker. He thought he is something really, some small person, he just tried to bully him. He tried to, harm him. And he told me forthwith as in immediately, right now, you better leave Tirhut. See, the thing was, those people started realizing that Gandhi is up to something. They wanted to make sure that he does no harm, so they asked him to just leave immediately before he makes any such big movement out here. Gandhi did not leave. Instead, he proceeded to Motihari, the capital of Champaran. Now, from there, he went to Motihari, the capital of Champaran. Several lawyers accompanied him. Many lawyers went with him. They went with him to Motihari. At the railway station, a vast multitude greeted Gandhi. As he was there at the station, large number of people actually welcomed him. He went to a house and, using it as headquarters, continued his investigations. He went to stay in some house and he used that place, that house, as the headquarters, and he continued his investigations. He was still finding out about the details. A report came in that a peasant had been maltreated in a nearby village. Now there he got a report that a peasant, a farmer, he had been badly treated in a nearby village. Gandhi decided to go and see. The next morning, he started out on the back of an elephant. Now, see, he was a person who never wanted to see anyone suffering through injustice, right? So he went over there. He found out that that farmer had been ill-treated. He had been badly treated. So he quickly, the very next morning, he started to go to that village. He started there, but how did he go? He went on the back of an elephant. He had not proceeded far when the police superintendent's messenger overtook him and ordered him to return to town in his carriage. Now, you remember he was on the back of an elephant and he was heading to the village where the farmer had been ill-treated. So while he was there, he had not gone very far when the police superintendent's messenger, a messenger came from there, he overtook him, he went in front of him and he ordered him to return to town in his carriage. He told him, you get down from that elephant, get into my carriage and you let's go back to town. Gandhiji complied. He gave in. He's like, okay. I mean, he did not go against it. He went in for it. He agreed. The messenger drove Gandhi home where he served him with an official notice to quit Champaran immediately. What he did was the messenger drove Gandhiji home. He took him home to his place and there he served him with an official notice. What was the notice? That you need to quit Champaran immediately. You need to leave from here right now. Gandhi signed a receipt for the notice and he wrote on it that he would disobey the order. He signed there and he wrote there, I'm sorry, I disobey the order. I shall not leave. In consequence, because of that, as a result, Gandhi received a summons to appear in court the next day. Now, because he disobeyed the order, the very same moment he received a summon, an official letter from the court to appear in court the next day. They told him, okay, fine. If that's what you're doing, you appear in court tomorrow. All night, Gandhi remained awake. He did not sleep. He telegraphed Rajendra Prasad to come from Bihar with influential friends. Now, he telegraphed him. He told him, look, you please come here immediately and come along with your influential friends. Bring your friends we can use some influence. He sent instructions to the ashram. He wired a full report to the viceroy. He started doing all his things what he was supposed to. Morning found the town of Motihari black with peasants. They did not know Gandhi's record in South Africa. They had merely heard that a Mahatma who wanted to help them was in trouble with the authorities. Their spontaneous demonstration in thousands around the courthouse was the beginning of their liberation from the fear of the British. Now, if you remember, when he was there in South Africa, what had happened? So likewise, similarly, this is what happened here. When he went to the courthouse was surrounded by thousands and thousands of peasants. All of them were there, right? They were in support of Gandhiji and the courthouse. Now, this was there. Now, this indicated what? It was the beginning of their liberation from the fear of the British. Now, this fear of the British, which actually Gandhiji wanted, these peasants to be free from. Now, this had started. This was the beginning that their fear started getting lesser and lesser. They were getting to become more bold and more brave because of all the steps taken by him and the support of the peasants. As in, they all came there. See, if they were afraid, they wouldn't have come there. Right? But they wanted things to happen. They knew Gandhiji was actually doing something for them, so they were there with him. The officials felt powerless without Gandhiji's cooperation. They felt they had no power because he was not cooperating. He helped them regulate the crowd. He says, okay, let me handle the crowd. He was polite and friendly. He was giving them concrete proof that their might, their power, hitherto as in until now or until the point in time under discussion, until then, dreaded and unquestioned, dreaded as in regarded with great fear, and it was unquestioned, could be challenged by the Indians. Now, he was very friendly to those people. To which people he was telling those Britishers. He was very polite and he was very friendly to them, and he told them, look, concrete proof. He was actually giving them concrete proof that their power, which was there until then, okay, at that point of time. It was dreaded, it was regarded with great fear and unquestioned. Now this power so far, which was not questioned, which the people were scared of their power, right? So far it was there, but now it could be challenged. This power, which was unquestioned, which was dreaded, was full of might, their power till then. Now it could be challenged by the Indians. Wow. So now this was like a, a sweet slap on their face. Says, so far you did what you wanted, but right now, please beware. The Indians are waking up, right? Waking up to look forward to another bright morning. And when was that? How was that? We shall watch in part 2. The government was baffled as in they were bewildered, they were shocked. The prosecutor requested the judge. Who's the prosecutor? The lawyer. He requested the judge to postpone the trial. Looking at so many peasants over there, they were all shocked. Like, what is this? How is this possible? Apparently, the authorities wished to consult their superiors. Now, they had no idea how to control all this, and they wanted to ask their superiors what should be done. Gandhi protested against the delay. Gandhi was already there. He says, why is it delaying? Let's begin. Let's start. He read a statement pleading guilty. He says, yes, I am guilty. He was involved, he told the court, in a conflict of duties. Conflict of duties as in opposing duties. He did not do what he was supposed to do. On one hand, not to set a bad example as a lawbreaker. On the other hand, to render the humanitarian and national service for which he had come. He says, see, on one hand, maybe I have opposed duties, I have not, done my duty. But remember, at the other end, I have been a perfect humanitarian, as in related to human welfare. I had come to help these people, and so I am here to support them. So he was between those two. He disregarded the order to leave. He says, no, I am not going to leave. Not for want of respect for lawful authority, not that he did not have respect for the lawful authority, but in obedience to the higher law of our being, a law which is way higher than this. And what is that? The voice of the conscience. The voice of the conscience is sense of right or wrong. All of us get that voice inside. When you are doing something wrong, one instinct, one voice comes from within you telling you that you are wrong. But you know what? We are so, you so want to do it that you just avoid it. You just ignore that sound and you do it, right? And then, of course, you eventually do fall into trouble. Likewise, I'll tell you, quite often in your MCQs, okay? Quite often when you have options A, B, C, D, and the very first thing when you read the question, you're not very sure, but the very first answer that clicks your mind is always the right answer. What happens? It's A. Then maybe it's B, maybe it's C. I think I better mark C. Then we do that. And that is where we don't hear the conscience. And then eventually you get to know A was the right answer. So quite often it is the case where you realize that what you hear for the first time, your inner voice, that's your inner voice basically. That is the right answer. So your conscience always tells you, whether you are doing right or whether you're doing wrong, but it is up to us how much we obey it. If we obey it, yes, we are safe and we are happy. But if not, then of course, you're definitely falling in trouble. And I'm sure you must have faced that. Hereafter, try listening to your conscience. And most importantly, start obeying it. Yeah. So, Gandhiji said, but in obedience to the higher law of our being, the voice of conscience, he asked the penalty due. He says, I'm all set. I'm all ready for anything. Please let me know what is the penalty. The magistrate announced that he would pronounce sentence, he would give the final decision after a 2-hour recess, and asked Gandhi to furnish bail, to furnish as in to present to produce or to present bail for those 120 minutes. What do you mean by bail? We all know, when you go to you go to the prison, then there's some lawyer or some person of yours comes and grants, they give you a bail. What is that? They have to give certain amount of money, yeah, so that you can be released for a certain amount of time, not for good. Yeah, that bail is given for a certain amount of time for you to be released from the jail, and then maybe 1 day, 2 day, whatever, I don't know. So this is what he tells him. He says, you are going for 120 minutes. But for that, give some bail, give some money. Gandhiji refused. He says, sorry, I will not. The judge released him without bail. He says, okay, fine, go ahead. When the court reconvened as in when it started again after that, 120 minutes break, the judge said he would not deliver the judgment for several days. He says, no, I am not going to give this judgment for quite some days. I postpone this. Meanwhile, he allowed Gandhi to remain at liberty. So by that time, he says, still I can give the final verdict, the final judgment. Till then, you are free. There's no problem. You can go out and you're absolutely free. Rajendra Prasad, Brij Kishore Babu, Maulana Mazharul Haq, and several other prominent lawyers, prominent as in very important, very well-known lawyers, had arrived from Bihar. So many of them had come from Bihar to see what was going to happen. They conferred with Gandhi. They actually granted with Gandhi. They actually sat and discussed and they spoke to him. What would they do if he was sentenced to prison? Gandhi asked. Gandhi asked all these lawyers, okay, tell me one thing. What if I would have been sentenced to prison? What would you people have done? Why? The senior lawyer replied, they had come to advise and help him. If he went to jail, there would be nobody to advise and they would go home. He says, simple. We came from Bihar to help you, to suggest, to, advise you. But if you would have gone inside, you would have been prisoned to jail. What would we have done? We would have just gone back. Whom we would help? What about the injustice to the sharecroppers? Gandhi demanded. He says that means all the injustice that is being done to the sharecroppers, what about them? You guys would have done nothing about them. If I would have gone to prison, you would have gone back home. What about them? The lawyers withdrew to consult. The lawyer says, okay, fine, let us consult, let us just decide, let us come to a conclusion and then think what we could have done or what we can do. Rajendra Prasad has recorded the upshot of their consultations, the conclusion, the result of their consultations. They thought amongst themselves that Gandhi was totally a stranger and yet he was prepared to go to prison for the sake of the peasants. They were just thinking, just imagine, he is a stranger. He is not even related to any of these people. He doesn't even know them. Champaran, he has come for the very first time. He didn't even know such a place existed. So he says, being a stranger, just imagine, he is ready to go to prison just for those people whom he doesn't even know. And they were pretty shocked at this. If they, on the other hand, being not only residents of the adjoining districts, adjoining as in the neighboring districts, but also those who claimed to have served these peasants should go home, it would be a shameful desertion. It would be a shameful act of living. He says, imagine, this man as a stranger, he is even ready to go to prison for them. And we who are actually living in the nearby districts, we are just close by there and we are here to serve these peasants. Just imagine, we are doing nothing but going home. That would be such a shameful deed, such a disgraceful thing for us to do. He being a stranger is doing and we being there, staying closely, are doing nothing. They accordingly went back to Gandhi and told him they were ready to follow him into jail. The battle of Champaran is won, he exclaimed. This is, yes, even we are ready to go to jail with you. And he says, the battle of Champaran is won. So if you people are with me, we shall win this battle. Everyone shall get justice. Then he took a piece of paper and divided the group into pairs and put down the order in which each pair was to quote arrest. Now he made them into pairs. He made them into twos. You make a pair, you make a group of two. and he took it on a piece of paper. He prepared that, he divided the group, and he told them which each pair was to court arrest, which pair would come when, in what sequence. Several days later, Gandhi received a written communication from the magistrate, as in the civil officer who administers the law, informing him that the lieutenant governor of the province had ordered the case to be dropped. He says, this case which you were fighting has been dropped. Civil disobedience had triumphed, as in the peaceful form of political protest. For the first time, they had peacefully protested. There was no violence, there was no killing, nothing. Totally peacefully it happened, and the first time in modern India, such a case had won. It had triumphed for the very first time. Gandhi and the lawyers now proceeded to conduct a far-flung inquiry into the grievances of the farmers. Far-flung as in the distant or the remote, far and far till where they had issues. Now they wanted to conduct a far-flung inquiry. They wanted to find out the grievances as in the problems of the farmers. What problems were they facing? Depositions by about 10,000 peasants were written down and notes made on other evidence. Now what they had done was they wanted to bring down a lot of people. Deposition is when you act of removing many people from important positions. So these guys were really so upset. So they wrote down everything and they collected all the evidence. Documents were collected. The whole area throbbed with the activity of the investigators. It throbbed as in it was showing a lot of activity. Everyone was running from here to there, collecting documents, collecting evidence. There was a lot of activity happening. And the vehement protests of the landlords, vehement as in showing strong feeling, forceful, passionate or intense, all of them were really, protesting against these landlords. In June, Gandhi was summoned to Sir Edward Gate, the Lieutenant Governor. Finally, in the month of June, Gandhiji was called out there. He was supposed to meet him. Before he went, he met leading associates and again laid detailed plans for civil disobedience if he should not return. So he went, to meet. Now before meeting, what he did was he met leading associates. He met other many people, all the leading associates, and he told them, I am going to meet him. Now, just in case I don't return, then what is the plan? What will you people do if I don't come back? This is what he does before going to meet him. Gandhi had 4 protracted interviews with the Lieutenant Governor, who as a result appointed an official commission of inquiry into the indigo sharecroppers situation. He had literally 4 protracted interviews, as in interviews which lasted for very long. He had 4 of them. And finally, after such a long conversation, Lieutenant Governor appointed an official commission of inquiry, into this to find out about the indigo sharecroppers. The commission consisted of, now who all were there as part of the commission? You all should know. Landlords, government officials, and Gandhi as the sole representative of the peasants. He was the whole and sole, the only one representing all the peasants. And there were, of course, landlords and the government officials. These people made up the commission. Now, Gandhi remained in Champaran for an initial uninterrupted period of 7 months and then again for several shorter visits. He stayed there first for 7 months and then he kept coming and going. The visit undertaken casually on the entreaty of an unlettered peasant in the expectation that it would last a few days occupied almost a year of Gandhi's life. That one request, made by Shukla, he thought maybe, it'll last for a few days and it'll be done. But imagine, he got so deep into it, the entreaty of an unlettered, the earnest or the humble request. That humble request, he had gone with him everywhere just to, make sure that he comes to Champaran. And Gandhiji was so impressed by his dedication. So that one request where Gandhiji actually gave in and then it lasted for a year. They had expected maybe in few days it will get over. The official inquiry assembled a crushing mountain of evidence against the big planters, and when they saw this, they agreed in principle to make refunds. Refund, you know what's a refund? The repayment of a sum of money to the peasants. But how much must we pay? They asked Gandhi. Now these people had collectively collected all the documents, all the evidence. They had literally a crushing mountain of evidence that these people have been cheating us. So finally they could not fight it. These people actually could not fight back, and so they gave in. They says, right, we are wrong. So now how much do we refund these peasants back? How much should we pay them back? They asked Gandhi. They thought he would demand repayment in full of the money which they had illegally and deceitfully extorted from the sharecroppers. Now, what they thought was, maybe, that extra money that we have taken from them, Gandhi would tell us to give that back. Yeah, which they had illegally and deceitfully, as in cheating, in a very cheating manner, extorted, obtained using unfair means from the sharecroppers. All that unfair means they had adopted. He asked only 50%. There he seemed adamant, writes Reverend J.Z. Hodge, a British missionary in Champaran who observed the entire episode at close range. He says now there he was pretty adamant, he was pretty stubborn that they want 50%. Yeah, and who was this Reverend J.Z. Hodge? He was a British missionary, a person on religious mission. Okay, he was there in Champaran at that point of time, and he was watching all this very closely. Thinking probably that he would not give way, thinking maybe he might not agree to that, the representative of the planters offered to refund to the extent of 25%. Now, how much did Gandhiji claim? He claimed 50% of the total amount, whereas these people were, bringing him yet half to 25%. And to his amazement, to the shock, Mr. Gandhi took him at his word. He was okay with it. He agreed for 25%, thus breaking the deadlock, thus breaking the standstill. Somebody had to move. These people were 50, these people were 25, some midway had to come, and Gandhiji agreed to it, and thereby breaking the deadlock. This settlement was adopted unanimously by the commission, as in without any opposition. They were okay with it. Gandhi explained that the amount of the refund was less important than the fact that the landlords had been obliged to surrender part of the money. He says, look, I understand the amount is less, but it is way less important than the fact that these people had agreed to give a part of the money back, right? Surrender part of the money, and with it, part of their prestige. That was important for Gandhiji. He says the money is not that important. Therefore, as far as the peasants were concerned, the planters had behaved as lords above the law. The planters they had considered themselves to be something great. They were considering themselves higher than the law when it came to peasants. They were that bad. Now the peasants saw that he had rights and defenders. He learnt courage. He as in all the peasants. The peasants now said, okay, now we know how to fight. Now we know we can defend ourselves from that attack. So now they learnt courage out of this whole process. Events justified Gandhi's position. Within a few years, the British planters abandoned their estates. They gave away their estates, which reverted to the peasants, which returned to the peasants. They gave back those estates. Estates were those small land blocks which those planters were holding. Now they gave it up, right? They abandoned it and they were given to the farmers, the peasants. Indigo sharecropping disappeared finally. Now there was no longer that they had to grow indigo and they had to give it to, the planters, and they would sell and make money, and these poor people would remain poor all the time. So till here you have to understand how the whole episode happened, that indigo sharecropping disappeared. Now this can come as a good 4 marks question. So you need to explain that entire process. Now, Gandhi never contented himself with large political or economic solutions. He did not be very satisfied or happy about the fact, oh, I brought this. He did not have that. He was a very humble, very modest person. He saw the cultural and social backwardness in the Champaran villages and wanted to do something about it immediately. Now what he saw, what he noticed was the cultural and the social backwardness, the way the people were living there. They were way backward. They were not as per they should be. They were not aware of so many things. That bothered Gandhiji, and he wanted to make sure that he does something about it at once. He appealed for teachers, Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parikh, 2 young men who had just joined Gandhi as disciples, and their wives volunteered for the work. He appealed for teachers. He wanted teachers to come there to educate these people, to make them aware of so many things that they were not aware of. Yeah. So he called for teachers, and who all volunteered? So there were Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parikh. Please remember these names. These people, along with their wives, volunteered for the work. They were just 2 young men who had just joined Gandhi as disciples. They had started following him. So they were ready for it. They said, we shall go ahead, the 4 of them. Several more came from Bombay, Pune and other distant parts of the land. Many other teachers came as well. From where? From Bombay, from Pune and other distant parts of the land. Devdas, Gandhi's youngest son, arrived from the ashram, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. His wife and his youngest son Devdas also came there. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Imagine, so many teachers came that they could open primary schools in 6 villages. Kasturbai taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. Now his wife, Kasturba Gandhi, she taught the ashram rules, the rules that they were applying in the ashram over there in Ahmedabad, on personal cleanliness and community sanitation, as in conditions relating to public health, especially the provision of clean drinking water and adequate sewage disposal. How there should be proper good sanitation. There should be cleanliness over there. This is what she did. Health conditions were miserable. They were terrible. They were totally uncomfortable, unhappy. Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months. Now, along with educators, along with the teachers, he also wanted doctors there. Why? Because the health conditions were extremely bad over there. So yes, they also had, a doctor to volunteer for 6 months. 3 medicines were available. Imagine, only 3. Castor oil, quinine and sulfur ointment. Anybody who showed a coated tongue was given a dose of castor oil. Anybody with malaria fever received quinine plus castor oil. Anybody with skin eruptions, skin diseases, received ointment plus castor oil. Now these were the medical facilities provided to them. Yes, you need to know this. You need to make sure that you're well aware of this. This is how you will say how the progress of Champaran actually happened. Here in case of health-wise and previously with education-wise. So you need to know how the progress actually took place. Gandhi noticed the filthy state of women's clothes. Filthy as in disgustingly dirty, very dirty. He actually noticed, he observed so many things. That this is what was disturbing him. This is where he wanted to actually, make sure that he gets into it and, actually frees these people of all the problems there. So he even noticed the dirty dressing of the women's clothes. He asked Kasturbai to talk to them about it. Now, obviously, he as a man could not tell them, right? So he asked his wife to do it. He says, you please talk to the women. One woman took Kasturbai into her hut and said, look, there is no box or cupboard here for clothes. The sari I am wearing is the only one I have. Now, being a lady, she could discuss it with a lady. So, you know that one woman, she took Kasturba into her hut. She said, see, we don't have any box. We don't have any cupboards. Where do I keep clothes? The sari, she said, that I am wearing is the only one I have. I don't have any other. During his long stay in Champaran, Gandhi kept a long distance watch on the ashram. Now, though he was at Champaran, he still made sure that he came to know everything what was happening at Ahmedabad in his ashram. He kept a long distance watch. He sent regular instructions by mail and asked for financial accounts. By mail is not email, you know, what we have now. Those days there was nothing of that sort. So, he sent regular instructions to them by mail and he kept asking them the details of the financial accounts. All the financial proceedings that were happening, he asked for every detail. Once he wrote to the residents that it was time to fill in the old latrine trenches and dig new ones, otherwise the old ones would begin to smell bad. The latrine trenches are simple facilities used as toilets. He says now the old ones have become so bad that they will start smelling. So they will have to dig new ones so that they have no issues. So they will have to make new latrine trenches. You can see these are the trenches you have to, you know, for the disposal to go out, they had to do that. He wrote to the residents. So they had to do that. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhi's life. Now this whole episode, everything that happened at Champaran, starting with Rajkumar Shukla's request, he going there, staying there for a year and bringing up so many changes, it actually brought a point of decisive change in his life. What I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. See, Gandhiji, he was so humble. He was the whole and soul representing the peasants. Because of him, these guys actually got free of the indigo sharecropping. He was a hero at that point of time. But see, check his words. What I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. I declared that the British could not order me about in my own country. He says, I did a very simple thing. This country is mine. Who are the British to order me? They cannot. They are in my country. But Champaran did not begin as an act of defiance. Now, they did not have that resistance to authority. They were totally pressurized by them, right? They did not have the guts to fight back. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate the distress of large numbers of poor peasants. Now, it grew out of an attempt to alleviate, as in to make something less severe. The problems that they were facing, the severe problems, the dense problems they were facing. So, he made an attempt to reduce that. The distress, as in the extreme anxiety or sorrow, to bring down the sorrow of large number of poor peasants. This was the typical Gandhi pattern. His politics were intertwined with the practical day-to-day problems of the millions. Now, this is how actually Gandhi worked. You remember, he was totally, against violence. He totally went non-violently. So, what he did was, his politics were intertwined as in they were connected. They were linked together with what? With the practical day-to-day problems of the millions. He did not look at those big things. First, he wanted all his people happy. So, he looked into them. Now, imagine clothes, the lavatory, there were so many things he looked into. Health, education, all that he looked into so that these people are happy. His was not a loyalty to abstractions, things existing in ideas. It was not that. His was not a loyalty to abstractions. It was a loyalty to living human beings. He wanted the people first to smile, to be free from sorrow, from any stress. They wanted freedom, right? He wanted to make sure that they are happy. He was not connected to abstractions as in, thinking of things existing in ideas. Nothing like that. It was practical. It actually happened. He didn't talk big. He did big. He was more into action rather than words. That was important. In everything Gandhi did, moreover, he tried to mold a new free Indian who could stand on his own feet and thus make India free. Whatever he did, what was his intention behind it? He tried to mold, he tried to make a new free Indian who could stand on his own feet and make India free. He wanted supporters. He wanted people to move like him. So he was preparing those people. Early in the Champaran action, Charles freed Andrews, the English pacifist as in a person who believes that war and violence are unjustifiable. He did not believe in that, right? Who had become a devoted follower of the Mahatma, came to bid Gandhi farewell before going on a tour of duty to the Fiji Islands. Now, there was this English pacifist. He also was, against the war and violence. He did not believe in that. Even he was a type, same like Gandhiji, who did not believe in violence. So even he, when he saw this whole action of Gandhiji, how he did it without any, blood shed. No one hit anybody, no one killed anybody, without any bloodshed, he was so happy that he became a devoted follower of the Mahatma. He actually became a very loving, a very loyal follower of the Mahatma, and he came to bid him farewell. He came to show him his love and respect, and he came to tell him bye-bye for what? Before going on a tour of duty, he was going on a tour of duty to the Fiji Islands. So imagine, even the English person was happy with Gandhi's, way of working. Gandhi's lawyer friends thought it would be a good idea for Andrews to stay in Champaran and help them. In fact, Gandhi's lawyer friends, they thought it's actually better if this person, Andrews, stays back in Champaran and he helps them. Instead of going away to Fiji Islands, he should help them. Andrews was willing. If Gandhi agreed, he was happy. He says, I don't mind if Gandhi tells me, yes, I will stay back. But Gandhi was vehemently opposed. He did not do that. He says no. He said, you think that in this unequal fight, it would be helpful if we have an Englishman on our side? He says, no, that's not the right thing to do. We are fighting the English, and if we have an English by our side, it's not good. This shows the weakness of your heart. He says, no, this is wrong. It is not the right way what we are doing. It shows our weakness. We are taking their person into our team. It's wrong. The cause is just, and you must rely upon yourselves to win the battle. He says, look, this cause, what we are doing is a very just cause. It is something which it should happen. We are not doing for something invalid. This is a very valid cause. So you people should fight and win the battle yourselves. Don't take support like this. You should not seek a prop. Seek a prop as in request or ask for support in Mr. Andrews because he happens to be an Englishman. He says, no, you cannot take an Englishman's support. He had read our minds correctly. Rajendra Prasad comments, and we had no reply. He read our minds. He understood. We were actually, doing that wrong thing by calling an Englishman into our team and then taking his help. Gandhiji understood that. He read our minds correctly. And we had no reply. Obviously, he caught us red-handed. He read our mind, what we wanted, what was our intention. Obviously, we were guilty, we were wrong. Gandhi, in this way, taught us a lesson in self-reliance. Reliance on one's own powers and resources. You have to rely. You have to believe in your own powers. That's self-reliance. Self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers were all bound together. Self-reliance, believe in your own powers, Indian independence, the independence of India, and the help to sharecroppers. They were all bound together. All came up together, and this is how it actually worked out when Gandhiji went to Champaran. So, how do we conclude this beautiful chapter? In a gentle way, you can shake the world, says Mahatma Gandhi. You can shake the world in a gentle way. You don't have to take a sword and a knife. You don't have to take guns. You don't have to use bullets. You don't have to do any bloodshed. You can do it in a gentle way. You can shake the world as in you don't have to literally shake the world, but what he means is you can do something really big. Even if it is some major thing to achieve, you don't have to fight for it. Yes, do it in the simple manner, do it with love, and it's all yours. Yes, so wishing you all the luck, and yes, keep watching and keep learning.